physically you might be today, and your name, or anything else you want us to know about. Would love to get a sense of who all else is in the room. You have two by your side, two doggies. Oh.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start the recording.
Yes, it's noon.
Yep.
All right, so we're recording?
We are.
All right, thank you so much, Erin. Erin and I are here to talk with you today about supporting online student success. So if that's what you were hoping for, you're in the right place. I am the director of online teaching at Open SUNY, and we may have a couple of our colleagues here on the line with us, Erin Maney and Rob Pierkowski. If you see them in the participant list, they're here helping out with posting links and answering questions. So we do these webinars pretty much once a month or so to help make sure that the community is aware of the many rich resources that we have available to support online faculty and online instructional designers. And so I'm really hoping to share this resource with you, wondering if you might have seen it before. And I just want to kind of go over it and point out a couple of things that I think will be very helpful, whether you're an instructor, whether you're new, whether you're a remote instructor, a new online instructor, an instructional designer. I think understanding how to support online student success, there's lots that we could talk about with this. And while this webinar is a half hour intended to, have me chat to you while you're having your lunch a little bit, it would be lovely to have some conversation about it and to know what you do to support your own online student success, as I'm sure many of you are very experienced and have a lot of your own approaches and your own, go-to things that you do. I did want to sort of start out by talking a little bit about some general suggestions and tips that you might do to support online student success. And then we'll talk a little bit theoretically about sort of a framework that you can use to sort of understand the different elements of supporting online student success. And then I will go into some specific recommendations or tips or suggestions and show some things. I'm speaking, of course, from my role as the director of online teaching. I was the first online instructional designer in SUNY back in 1994. I've taught online at the University of Albany in the Department of Education Theory and Practice for many years. And so the examples that I'll show you will be from my own course. And so I'm really happy to be here and to have you share a little of your time with us to learn more about this topic. So I highlighted a couple of things here. I'm not going to read the whole list to you, and I'm hoping that you will come back to this resource and kind of further mine it for ideas and for topics and things that you might be able to adapt to your own online instruction. And many of these things are, known best practices, and you're likely doing them already. So, for example, I've highlighted a couple of things in this list about being accessible to your students. I think anyone who has taught online knows and understands how the perception and the reality of accessibility of the instructor in the course to the students is key. It's very, very important. I'll talk more a little bit later about how to encourage self-reflection in an online environment. I have that as a main feature of my own instruction, and the things that I encourage with students. Of course, anyone who's taught online knows about the value and the importance of maintaining high expectations and about being explicit about that and in their community. I saw that kitty walk by. Sorry, distracted. About how it's important to communicate those high expectations very clearly to the learners in your course. And then the last one I wanted to mention in this particular list was about recognizing and acknowledging student success and their efforts and their accomplishments in their work, in their life challenges as they're juggling their reality with trying to make incremental progress in their education, and of course with the technology being used. One of the things that I have set up, and I have this actually out of order, is in our remote teaching checklist, which I do a whole other webinar about the remote teaching checklist. And if you're interested in looking at that a little further and haven't seen it yet, Erin will pop the link to the checklist in the chat. But this is one of the pages in that checklist which has to do with accumulation, with communication. And so really thinking about everything, especially in this moment, if you're remote teaching, if your students are being affected at all in terms of being in remote teaching and learning experiences, if you are to really think about things from your students' perspectives and not to assume things. And any of you who have already had experiences with this, I'm sure could give us, lots and lots of stories about how, all the different challenges and sort of contexts and circumstances that students are grappling with as they, as reality shifts from being face-to-face students to being remote learners. So at some point or another, you might want to check out the checklist in this resource. One of the other things that I wanted to mention here that's the last thing on this list is to help students to feel reassured that they can be successful. I always tell my own students to really, really understand the power that you have in helping your students believe that they can be successful, whatever the challenges are that they are facing. And so to me, this is almost one of the most important one, to really make sure that your students feel that you believe in them and that you believe that they can succeed, whatever their challenges are. And one of the ways that I do this in my own class, well, I have many strategies and I'll show you a couple of them in a second, but one of the ways is to collect stories from my current students for my future students. And I do that in a Padlet at the end of culminating activity for the course, and I just ask the students that are about to finish my course what advice they have for any future students taking the course. And this is just a simple free tool called Padlet, and you simply come here to this page. I give them the link to it and they can come here and they can post a link, they can post a little blurb in text, they can post a video, they could post an audio, they could post an image. You can see here that some people have posted some images. And so then I open the class the next time I teach it with this advice from from former students in the class. So just one small, idea, suggestion of how to help your students and reassure them about their success. It's also, as I mentioned, a culminating activity, a way to create a sense of course closure in an online class where they feel like, they can express something to the future students of the course. So I invite you to come back to this page and to go through and read more deeply many of these tips or these suggestions and see how you might adapt them or apply them or actually already do in your own instruction. And so now what I want to chat with you a little bit about is about self-regulated learning strategies. And this is the framework, the theoretical framework that I talked about that I wanted to give you a little sort of intro and primer to so that you could understand and have a framework from which to think about all of these suggestions, right? And why. And so self-regulated, there's a huge body of research out there about self-regulated learner self-regulation, learner self-efficacy, and so this is not going to go into a lot of huge detail about that, but I just wanted you to see and see that it's presented in kind of a grid on this page to give you some additional sort of insight into how this can be categorized and organized to, like I said, provide that framework. So on the left here are the self-regulated learning strategies. The overall categories are thought, performance, and self-observation and self-reflection. And within each of those broader categories, there are indicators or subcategories that fall under that, that main category. And so under forethought is the category of goal setting and planning. And in a traditional class, students will use calendars, they'll use organizers, they'll chunk their work up, they'll have self-imposed deadlines. And then to adapt to an online environment, an online student would be expressing goal setting and planning by logging in daily, by coordinating their online work and their offline work, by planning and anticipating tech problems. So that's that particular category. And I have this table laid out with the other indicators such as organizing and transforming instructional materials. And you can see here what the corresponding face-to-face strategies are, and then the adaptations for the online environment. Structuring and the learning environment is another one of these subcategories. Help seeking, self-monitoring, and record keeping. And then under self-reflection, we have self-judgment and self-reactions. So I'm hoping that this framework will provide you with a way to further understand, to better understand what is actually, the underpinnings of the theoretical underpinnings about supporting online student success. And that's the way that I framed all of the suggestions and all the tips going further that I'm about to chat with you about. So when we were, so let's talk here about goal setting. The way that I have this website, there's a ton of stuff on this one page. And so I am hoping that you will go back and browse through it. And I talk about it both from the perspective of successful online students and strategies that successful online students exhibit. But I also, in each section, talk about what a faculty person can do to help with each of the categories of self-regulated learning strategies. And so for the category of goal setting and planning from the faculty perspective, there are some things that you can do, and I'm sure there's a ton of other things, but these are the ones that I've highlighted here in this section for you. To set up, to leverage the power of the learning management system to set up friendly reminders and announcements. You might also want to incorporate a cool tool that's external to the learning management system, like Remind. I don't know if anyone, if you happen to use that in your online course, that would be cool to know. And I have a link to Remind right there for you to browse and check out at a later time. But this is a very cool tool that will help you to push out communications and text to your students. And you can see up here in the strategies for students, you can see some of the recommendations. And so I'm hoping that you will come back and look at both of these and think about how you might encourage some of these behaviors and the use of some of these tools that students can use to help themselves with the goal setting and planning, self-regulated learning strategy. So you might want to create a tip of the day to help them think about some of these things. You might want to create or co-create some course community guidelines that help students think about these issues and think about how they can address some of these things in order to support their own success. All right, so let's see. I already showed you Remind. Let's go on to organizing and transforming instructional materials. So you can see there's a whole bunch of strategies that students can use to organize their materials. And then I have some suggestions for faculty of what you can do to help students manage and organize and optimize their materials. Again, adding to a tip of the week or a tip of the module, kind of an announcement might be an interesting way to approach that. I use a tool called Digo for managing and organizing content. I have my students use Digo. It's a social bookmarking tool. It's not like Zotero or Mendeley. It's not a citation organizer. It really is a social bookmarking tool that you could use a little bit like a citation organizer. But Digo is a very cool tool that will help students and yourself keep track of things that they're using in their class, information that they find. If they have to support any of their discussion posts with actual references that they find online, either from scholarly work or from other reputable resources, Digo can help you organize and track the links to that in a very, very cool way. And of course, there are other citation organizers and web annotation and notation products like Hypothesis and Zotero. Okay, so let's see. I have a link to Zotero here just to show you that tool. Let's go on to structuring the learning environment. And you can see that and I'm sure, if you have experience already, either remote teaching or teaching online, that you will have a sense of student challenges and difficulties and conflicts with setting up a good space in which to learn. You may also struggle with it yourself. For example, I'm here in my kitchen. My husband is working in the living room, and my daughter is upstairs taking her classes from a little office up there. So all of us are trying to arrange our settings so that we don't interrupt each other, and so that we have a good, comfortable, consistent place in which to do our work. So, some of the tips for faculty I would suggest in this particular category would be to have students take an online learning tutorial. I have a link there to one if you want to check it out. This is from Penn State. It's a very good one that I found, but many of our campuses have produced their own online learning tutorials. And so I would encourage you to find out if your campus has one, and if they do, to make sure that you incorporate that into the getting started activities with your students, to make sure that the students do that orientation, to help them, set up some, well, first of all, self-assess on many of these things, and then in this particular category, to structure their environment so that they have a good consistent place where they can be comfortable and set up and ready to learn. Similar to the page that I showed you initially on communication, it's really important not to make assumptions about your learners in your course. And so asking students, there may be difficult circumstances that students are grappling with where they don't have a place. Like if they don't have Wi-Fi where they are, they may be in their car next to the library so they can piggyback on the Wi-Fi at the library. And so though many students are having some very difficult challenges, especially at this time. So it's really important to not make assumptions and to understand what the contexts and circumstances are that your students are juggling and grappling with. And so in order to do that, you can just ask them, and see if there's anything that you should be aware of pertaining to their context and their learning environment. I put another resource up there about 7 ways to organize your study space. It's something that just to give you a sense of what's being recommended for online learners in terms of this particular category of setting up their learning environment. All right, so let's go over to the next category, which is help seeking. And there are a number of help sources that are available to students. There's technical sources, there's student support services, there's help from the instructor, and there's help from always available from their peers, right? So thinking that through and making sure that that information is easily understandable and available to students, that they know where to go for what specific types of help, both within your course and within the design of your course, is something that I would recommend. So here are some of the specific recommendations. Obviously, making your expectations very clear and explicit, making sure that students feel comfortable asking for clarification. One of the things that I do is I ask students to co-create the expectations with me, so that they have a sense that they have a say, and that there is buy-in to those expectations. Virtual office hours is another way to set up sessions with your students, and I'm sure many or all of you are doing most of these things. And then making sure that students know that they have permission to help each other, and creating a space within the course, within your course, that actually targets that. I have a space in my course that I called Ask a Question, and it's not ask me a question, it's ask a question in general. And I give permission. I actually say that you have permission to help each other out, so that students will feel like they have the ability to answer each other's questions in that particular space. Obviously there should be a link somewhere that's readily and easily accessible and available to the students about getting technical help. Here, this last thing. I thought this was super interesting, so I'll invite you to take a look at this at some point. We're not going to read all the way through it. This was a Twitter thread that I came across about a first-generation graduate student And I think this speaks about, kind of assumptions that people have or may have, which are always, are often problematic when one makes assumptions. So I thought that this was a particularly interesting thread, and though it has to do with a first generation graduate student, I think many of the things that she encountered would pertain or could be adaptable to an undergraduate. And so, I'll invite you to come back here at some point and read through this thread to really hear from a student's perspective some of the challenges that she had as a first generation student. So I'll just leave that there for you to check out when you have a chance. Let's go on to self-monitoring and record keeping. The thing that I highlighted here, there's a number of things that you can do in the design of your course. Obviously, the grade book and feedback and all the mechanisms within the course for students to monitor their progress, to benchmark themselves against others in the class. Many of those tools are built into whatever learning management system you're using. But the thing that I wanted to highlight in this one was the provision of rubrics to help students self-monitor and to understand their contributions and what the expectations might be. Rubrics are a wonderful tool when used well, effectively, to help students really understand what it is that you're expecting and how they can meet those expectations. And so here I have my discussion post grading rubric, just as one example. There are many examples of rubrics that can be used in online teaching and learning environments for different purposes, different assignments, discussions, projects, group work, and so forth. So this is just one of them. And in the checklist that I mentioned earlier, there is one page that has a whole bunch of resources and other examples of rubrics. But I just wanted to share with you here this one example. It's from my own course, and students have to peer evaluate as well as self-assess according to this particular rubric. I will say, that my course is a graduate level course, so keep that in mind as you're looking through this. It's just an example. All right, so let's move on to the next category, which is self-reflection. So again, rubrics can help with and checklists for assignments and discussions can help some with that targeting self-reflection. But what I do in my own instruction is much more deeply about metacognition. I really want students to think about what they're learning, how they're learning it, why they think that they're learning it, and what is helping and hindering their learning in their own, in themselves. And I have them blog. It's a metacognitive journaling activity. I do it and they do it. And so we are constantly thinking about our learning in my class and what's helping and what's hindering that learning. And if you're interested in some more information about this blog is my blog, and this is one of my self-reflections about why I ask students to blog to help to explain some of that. And then I've also written sort of a primer on metacognitive blogging and online instruction to help other instructors understand how to do it if they want to do it. So this is here as a resource if you're interested in understanding a little bit more, you know, how I do it, why I do it, and some examples. I have a lot of info on this page. These are the questions I actually ask my students in each of the modules of my course to reflect on as they go through each course. So you can check this out at your leisure if this is something that that resonates, that seems like something that you might want to adapt for your own instruction. And again, this was in the category of self-reflection in terms of self-regulated learning strategies. That this process of self-reflection is really important in helping to develop the characteristics and the strategies necessary to be successful online. So I'm hoping you'll check that out. Self-efficacy is this notion that students actually believe that they're competent, efficacious, and autonomous, that they believe that they can do it. And we touched on that a little bit at the beginning. I send love letters to my students at the beginning of each course. You know, and that's my personality. You don't have to send your students love letters, but, you know, helping them to, in whatever way that, that you feel is authentic to you, to help students feel that, you know them, that you believe in them, and that you believe that they can be successful, is going to help increase their own sense of self-efficacy. So things that online instructors can do, there's a number of things that they can do to help students feel or improve their sense of self-efficacy, and you know, building that into the design of the course, the communications that you have within your course, you know, making sure that students feel that they are able to come to you as the instructor in the course with any question or concern, or you know, or for any help that they might need, whether it has to do with the content of the course or some condition or circumstance surrounding the course. I think will be, you know, is a good way to help for the instructor to demonstrate to the students that they believe in them, and can reassure them that they can do this, that they can do it. Modeling behaviors, encouraging students to troubleshoot their technical problems, or to not jump in and try and fix things for them, to point them in directions for them to help themselves. And of course, always, you know, making sure that you're consistent, that you're clear, that your expectations are very visible to the students, that there's no confusion. And of course, the first time that you do this, if you're a first-time instructor, online instructor or remote instructor, you're going to learn so much just based on student questions and confusion. And you want to take all of that and incorporate that into revisions that you make to your course. So if you notice that students are having particular difficulties with an assignment, you know, and asking similar questions, several questions from several different students on a similar instruction, then you know that you have to go back to that instruction and clarify. You know, creating that supportive learning experience, online learning experience and environment is really key to this particular category of self-regulated learning. Let's move on to goal orientation and interests. We're almost out of time, but this is the last one. I have here, of course, you know, if you're familiar with Malcolm Knowles and the notion of andragogy, the dealing with adult students, making things that are relevant to real life experiences in terms of the activities in your course, and bringing in those lived experiences and giving students the option and the opening to apply what they're learning in your course to their own life or their own chosen area of discipline or their own skills and talents, it really is about learner-centeredness and about really thinking about giving students options and in how they make their thinking and their learning visible to you in this, online, largely asynchronous, unless you're doing a lot of synchronous online instruction. So creating opportunities for students to apply, the different aspects of your course to their own real lives is key in this particular area. You may have heard about growth mindset, and I have a couple of resources here on this page that are tools that students might be able to look at to think about things from a growth mindset perspective. And then I have a whole bunch of ideas for faculty on how they can support students in their goal orientation and making things relevant to their real life and on focusing their effort. The one thing that I wanted to highlight in this section, there's a ton of information here in this section, but as we kind of wrap this webinar up, I just wanted to point you to the Access, Equity, and Equality resource that I have posted here. And one small, easy suggestion, and you may already do this, but you might want to share your preferred name, the way that you want to be addressed to your students. Some people like to be addressed by their first name. Some people like to be addressed by, Dr. Pickett, for example. However it is that you would like to be addressed, make that clear to your students just so that they know. And also share your preferred pronouns with your students so that they can feel that it is an open and safe space for them to share their preferred pronouns and their preferred name with you. That's just one small suggestion in how to support students in terms of equity and inclusion. So that's all that I had here. I know I went over a lot, and I just wanted to introduce you to this resource. I wanted to show you what was here, give you a little bit of an understanding from both the student perspective and the faculty perspective of how one can support online student success, and give you a little bit of the theory in terms of self-regulated learning strategies so that you would be able to use that framework to better understand all of the things that we talked about. And now I'm ready for my first question. And Erin, I'm hoping you've been monitoring the chat and can point me to anything that I might need to look at.
Yeah, so I've captured a couple questions for you, and I'm going to ask them to make sure they get included in the recording in case any of those folks had to go. So Crystal asked regarding reflection and having students do that. She teaches math and had a student very upset about incorporating reflections in a math course because that student felt that they should just be learning math. How do you handle those types of situations?
Oh, that's just a great question. And I have such mixed feelings about it because I have had similar experiences in my class, and I don't teach math. Students ask me all the time, why do I have to blog? My other professor only has me write a paper and take a test. And, I just tell them, this is what I do in this class, and you have, if you're in this class, this is what we're going to do. And I love that you are doing reflection in a math class. I think that there is a lot of evidence to support that, regardless of the discipline, but particularly in math, this notion of perplexity and of I forget that what Vygotsky called it, but you know, this notion of really thinking about how you learn, what helps or hinders your learning, applies no matter what the discipline. And you know, for those students who don't feel like they have something to learn, it's a challenge for them, right? And I guess for you as the instructor too, to help convince them that if they stick with you, if they stick with it, that they will get something out of it, and then hopefully they will. And the reality is that sometimes, you know, there's students that you can't reach. I have had students be very angry at the fact that I do things iteratively, right? So when they submit their work and their papers, the expectation that I have for them is that it's not good the first time they do it. So they're going to need my feedback and the feedback from their peers to help improve their thinking. And so they can't just write a paper and be done with it. They have to iterate, and they have to be open to getting feedback from me so that they can dig deeper into their thinking, really think more deeply about whatever it is that we're talking about. And there are some students that just are very, very resistant to that. And I try and have understanding and compassion about it, because there's lots of different reasons why students have that mindset. And sometimes I can reach them and sometimes I can't. And, you know, sometimes they drop my course as a result. And sometimes they complain to the dean as a result. And, you know, or give me very bad, you know, rate your professor evaluations or evaluations. It's just, you know, part of the thing. And I can understand how upsetting it can be, because you really are trying to do what you think is best, what will help your students learning best, and it's not always received in that spirit. I know, but I love that you do it. What
This
else,
question
Erin?
is actually sort of related, you know, just talking about enforcing positivity, but it came up when you were showing the Padlet. And so Kendra asked, how do you encourage or enforce positivity? Unfortunately, students who are frustrated with the course or their grade tend to blame us, the instructor, right? So do you ever have the issue with posting negativity on the Padlet, and how do you handle that?
I have not. And, you know, because I own the Padlet, I could eliminate a post if I thought it was inappropriate, and deal with that student individually. But this is not public, right? It's publicly viewable. Like, any of you can see this, but in order to post to this, you actually have to be a student in the course, and their names are associated with it, I believe. If I'm looking at this, yeah, their names are all associated with it. So, you know, I haven't had that in a Padlet. I haven't had a student be inappropriate. I have had students be inappropriate within the course, and you always have, you know, the power to either hide or eliminate or directly address a student, and it is a tricky situation. Often I will let things stand unless it's grossly, like, I've never had anything grossly inappropriate. But you know, I feel pretty strongly that the artifacts that are left from a course are sort of representative of that. They're the footprints that have been left. And so I'm very careful and hesitant to remove anything, although I have heard of circumstances where it has been necessary because it was just so offensive. So yeah, you know, I do try to have a very positive, it's one of the expectations, you know, that you can set up. And if you do this, if you co-create the expectations with students at the beginning of the course, they'll come up with, you know, respect everyone's opinion kind of a thing for the expectations. They'll come up with it themselves. And it's interesting that students will kind of sometimes hold themselves to higher standards than you would if you were coming up with with it from scratch. So so you can also leverage the power of the group for that. So, you know, to help, you know, students call each other out on stuff in a positive way. You know, I mean, my students are graduate students, so, you know, in some ways there's probably some differences there. In some ways I know that there's not. But, you know, all right. So
this also ties into that, Alex, from Maureen. What if a student doesn't want to post or share their feelings about their course or their learning? Are they penalized? Do you have an alternative?
No. And so it's all, I don't make them do this activity. I ask them to. I say that it will help me and it will help future students in the course, and that if they would like to share their wisdom after having taken my course with future students of the course, that they're invited to do this. They do have to blog. That is a required activity in my course, and you know, it's 20% of the grade. So they not only have to blog, but there's a rubric that goes with the blog. They have to read everyone else's blogs in the course and peer assess anything that they respond to, because they also are required to interact with each other on their blogs. So so yeah, and I ask I frame the blogging activities based on what we're talking about in the course. And I ask, you know, I give them seeded questions. They can talk about whatever if they, you know, if they want to, but I give them some very specific questions to address. All right, what else?
Does the blog tie into the student learning outcomes, or does it take the place of a discussion perhaps in the LMS?
So it's just a different type of discussion. It's a self-reflection, and it is. I'm sorry, I lost the thread of the question, but it doesn't take the place of discussion. I do asynchronous online discussions in my course as well, but I also have the blogging activity, which although they can interact with each other in their blogs, and they can peer assess. It's different the way that I set that activity up than a discussion. You know, it's just it's a different dynamic. They don't have to, you know, respond to every single thing that's in there. The number of responses are fewer, but I do have them respond because I want to make sure that they're reading each other's reflections.
Great. So another question for you. I think I have just about two more. So Renee is expressing some of the difficulties that she has when, I believe she is having when students don't read comments about the assignments when you grade them. They don't read it or send emails even asking questions about it. They don't respond to your emails. And they tend to just do the other future assignments the same way and continue making the same pattern of errors. So just expressing that they keep failing assignments and there doesn't seem to be a way to connect or talk with them. Are there any strategies maybe around?
That's a great question. That is a really great question. And you know, I've had my own experiences with that. I'm sure all of us have. I think, you know, I constantly put reminders in public assignments saying I have left substantive feedback wherever I've put it. And because my course requires students to resubmit, you know, and I will adjust their grade when they do. I send public announcements and I send individual private communications to students when I see that they are just continuing to repeat. And, you know, initially I'll be very, you know, I'll assume that they just haven't seen it, or maybe it's their first class and they just don't know where to go. And so I will point things out to them, but as they continue to do it, if they continue to do it, you know, I'll get much more direct. And you know, I've had to tell some students, you're going to fail this course if you continue to do this, because you're not you're not reading, you're not responding, please respond immediately, those kinds of things. And if I'm really, really concerned, and if I have the time, and depending on the number of students in the class, I will reach out to them in other ways, try and find them to reach out to them in other ways. And I have learned some really interesting things by persisting and doing that. Really weird, surprising things. Like one semester, I remember a student who just kept saying publicly in the discussion how confused she was and how horrible everything was and how she didn't understand this or that or the other thing. And she just kept on doing that. Come to find, I got onto a webinar with her and she shared her screen with me. And I saw that what was going on and was flabbergasted, because what she was doing is not scrolling down, and this was in a Blackboard course, not scrolling down below the first screen that she saw. And so all of her comments all of a sudden made sense, because she didn't understand that there was a ton more of the course if she would just scroll down some, right? And so as a result of that experience, I ended up putting in letters right on my front screen: in order to see the entirety of this course, you need to scroll down. So yeah, I mean, it's always kind of surprising, what you learn.
Sure.
What else?
Yeah. And it could just be a misinterpretation like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Michael asked, in terms of time management, how much time do you expect your students to spend on a blog exercise? So for the assignment, like how many hours would they commit to that? And they understand it probably depends on the number of students you're for.
Yeah. And I've had to modify my expectations a number of times in my course as the numbers of students in my course increased. Initially, it was like between 9 and 12 students. And then the last semester that I taught the course, there was about 30 students in the course. And I've had to really, really modify the numbers of posts and the expectations. So, and that's the design of the course, right? I've had to sort of redesign for larger numbers of students. You can't really teach the course that was designed kind of as a seminar to a class of 30 students, especially with the amount of feedback that I give. So I've just had to adjust the design of the course. So in terms of expectations, I actually lay that all out. The blogging activity is 20% of the grade. And so they should be spending, 20% of their time and energy on those blogging activities. And I actually tell them how many hours are expected online and offline. I don't have that at my fingertips, but it goes along with a modification or an adaptation of the Carnegie expectations, the Carnegie unit expectations. And in fact, Rice University has a very, very cool tool to help you understand time on task. That in that checklist that I brought up at the beginning, there's a ton of resources in there, and I'm sorry I don't have that at my fingertips either. But if you time on task, Rice University, you'll find the resource. Ooh, thank you, Erin. There it is. So that'll help you as you are designing your activities to think through this issue of workload, so that you make it doable. One of the pitfalls for new online faculty is to create a course that is really a course and a half. And you don't want to kill yourself, and you don't want to kill your students either. You want to make sure that you are achieving all of your learning objectives, but you're doing it within a time frame that is actually doable for students who may be taking more than just your course or have other competing life priorities. And you also want to be able to actually teach the course yourself. So to me, this is a really important issue to nail down, and to think very, very carefully about what you're asking students to spend their time on. And this is a straight up instructional design problem, because whatever you're asking them to do has to map to a learning objective, and then has to have a corresponding mechanism for feedback or assessment or evaluation. So if there's anything in your course that you can't map in that way, you need to get rid of it, and really think about what you're asking them to do and how long you're anticipating it's going to take them to do it, so that you can see if it balances out. And that's in the design of the course. If you need help thinking that through, I would highly recommend that you talk to your online instructional designer on your campus. Most campuses have them, and they can help you think that through. All right, what else?
Last question that I see so far is from Kim. And a great question. So with COVID and adult learners, they're finding the Zoom for 3 to 4 hours almost impossible. So what ideas are there to break up and address this, this phenomenon of exhausted students?
I'm still kind of wrapping my head around that myself. And I know that there are a lot of resources out there. The checklist that I mentioned has resources for creating, effective and engaging synchronous online classes and activities. And maybe that's where I'll point you to on that checklist. If you look for the synchronous link, I think there'll be some resources there to have you look at. I have not taught my class in a synchronous manner. My class has only ever been an asynchronous online course, fully online asynchronous. I've only met with students like in virtual office hours in a synchronous manner, or to help them with a technical problem or some other kind of a problem where I've done a webinar kind of a thing with them. So I've never had to do it in a situation like this where we're all in webinars, it seems like all day, and the fatigue of that I have experienced myself, but I haven't had to teach in that way. So I don't know if anyone else has suggestions or links. Go ahead and pop them in the chat, because we can share, and I would love to hear what other people might have found.
Yeah, there's some great suggestions about pre-recording certain things and making them available to the student, before asynchronous session, or handing out things ahead of time, sort of the flip model, keeping Zoom sessions down to 30 minutes, and then, providing other things to work on after that, but not synchronously. And then your last question is the famous question: where is the kitty from, and how can they get that plugin?
Isn't it cute? I love it. So if you go to your browser, and I'm using Firefox, there is a pull down menu that says tools. And then if you select add-ons, I'm on that page right now. I'm on add-ons. And if you go to themes and look for animated kitty cat, you'll find a couple of them. And you can see on the page that I'm on right now, you can see I've had several of them, but this one that I have right now, I love. Its little tail and its little ear moves, and so it's very cute. And it's funny because I do always get that question. It's awesome. Thank you for whoever asked it.
You had several, yep.
Oh, good.
So I'm capturing some more suggestions in the chat, so thank you for those. That's great. We can include this chat as part of the recording. So those
Also,
will be really
if
helpful.
you just want to get the chat for yourself right now, down in the chat window to the right, you'll see 3 little dots. And if you click on the 3 little dots and select save chat, it'll save you the chat right now. And so we'll put it with the recording of this session, but you can save the chat for all the links for yourself right now if you want. All right.
And that
Thank
wraps
you
it
all
up.
for hanging in with us and for coming to the session and spending your lunch hour with us, and for your interest in supporting online student success. The one thing I'll leave you with as a parting supporting your online instructor success is understand the power that you have to help students believe in themselves and in their ability to succeed. Do not underestimate that. A word from you, a small word from you, can make all of the difference to a student. And I know you already know that. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining me today. I'm going to hang out here a little bit if in case anyone has any other questions or wants to chat about anything. So I'll stay here while folks leave. You know, tune in again. Our next one, Erin, when is that going to be?
December 2nd, and that is on the OSCAR, the course quality rubric.
Awesome. So if you're interested in learning more about our online course quality rubric, affectionately named Oscar, come back on December 2nd and we can chat again. Love seeing you all. Thanks so much.
Hey.